On behalf of Anita and Phil's family, I want to thank you all for being here today, and many of you who are joining online as well. We'll begin our service with the recitation of Psalm 23 by Kendra West.
ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Mizmor David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters and restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Yerachem al panim rechem Adonai al yireah, ki hu yadai Yisrael zachor kefar anachnu, enosh kechatzir yama ketzitza sadeh, ken yatzitz, ki ruach avrabo ve'enenu lo yakirinu od mekomo. Chesed Adonai me'olam me'olam al yireah, zikatoli ve'bani. As a father has compassion for his children, Adonai has compassion for those who show reverence. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are but dust. The days of mortals are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. A wind passes over them and they are no more, and no one can recognize where they grew. But the Lord's compassion is everlasting. To God's kindness and children's children, while the reverent ones endures age after age, unchanged. In just a few moments, Rabbi will give a moving eulogy for For some reason, when you're taking them out, they scream even more. To my friend Agneta, and to Agneta and Phil's children, Basha and James, Lisa and Peter, David and Debbie. To the grandchildren, Jessica, Mariasha, Zaya, and Shayna, all of you, to brothers, Harold and Ed. To you all, I extend my heartfelt condolences. Of course, you will hear many beautiful recollections of your husband, father, grandfather, and brother. There's so much to say about Phil, so many memories for a long life and a life well lived. I've been asked to speak about Phil's connection to this community, which was a very large part of his life and the life of his family. I have the privilege to reflect a bit about Phil's involvement at the Hebrew Education Alliance. He grew up, he and his brothers, at the Alliance from the time that his mother Elta was Rabbi Lederman's secretary, a role she held for decades. The boys lost their father, Julius, early in life, and Rabbi Lederman was there to guide them. Phil and his siblings went to the synagogue Talmud Torah. Most everything in Phil's life revolved around his lovely family and around the synagogue. There were several leadership positions that Phil held, both at the HEA and in the Jewish community at large. He was the chair of CAGE, once our Jewish Educational community-wide agency. At the synagogue, he chaired the religious school committee and worked hard to recruit the best teachers and create a top-notch curriculum. He was vice president for a number of years and served as HEA president from 1983 to 1987. Phil brought a youthful energy to his work for the shul. He was well regarded and respected. He provided a calm and steady hand to the Alliance, his leadership there. When I came to Denver in 1994, Phil was still on the board of the HEA. In those early years, once you got onto the board, they never let me leave. I don't remember the deliberations at one of these meetings when I first got here, but what I do remember is that when Phil spoke on the board, everyone was quiet and listened carefully. He was an elder statesman. He was well respected. No one knew the synagogue and the community better than Phil Cohen. I got to know Phil better from his coming to Minyan virtually every day. He would bring the cake and prepare the coffee for the Minyonaires. And he would always have a big smile on his face, as though life at the synagogue amused him. He was delighted to be there, and we were delighted to have him there. Phil Cohen was indeed a pillar of our synagogue community, and I just want the family to know that we in the community are deeply saddened at this moment. We mourn his passing, and we pray that his soul is now at peace. Thank you, Rabbi Don. Psalm 34 says, Lechu banim, shimuli yirat Adonai al madechem. Come, children, listen to me. I will teach you what it is to fear the Lord. Mi ha'ish hechapetz chaim oheb yamim liroto. Who is the person who is eager for life, who loves each day to see the good? Psalm 34 seems to capture Philip Cohen's values. Philip loved life. He loved his family and his community, and he was eager to enjoy the blessings of this world and to share them with others. Phil Cohen was born in Nebraska to Julius and Elta Cohen. Sadly, Julius died young, and Phil, along with his brothers Edward and Harold, didn't really know their father. The family was in turmoil
Elta, feeling pressure from Julius's family, moved to Denver where Julius's parents lived. Julius' father, Chaim, was not an easy man, but he played a fatherly role in his grandsons' lives. Elta went to work, as Rabbi Dallin mentioned, at the Hebrew Educational Alliance, serving as Rabbi Manuel Lederman's secretary for many years, and the Cohen boys grew up enmeshed in the alliance. Phil grew up on Denver's west side, graduated from West High School, and went to the University of Colorado. While working a job as a golf caddy, Phil took an interest in the men who seemed to have the leisure time to play golf in the middle of the day. So he asked them what they did for a living. They were dentists. So Phil went to dental school and studied orthodontics in Kansas City. He saved up his money and purchased a small plane in which he and his friend with a pilot's license would fly back and forth to Denver on the weekends. Having received draft referrals while he was in school, Phil decided to join the Army as an orthodontist. He served for 2 years at the military hospital in Munich, Germany. He enjoyed the lifestyle of an officer and socialized with other Jewish officers stationed in Germany. It was at the home of Colonel Walter Levy that he met a young Danish woman who worked on base and lived with the Levys. Phil and Anita fell in love. When Phil's service was completed, he returned to Denver, but the two exchanged frequent letters. Anita sought out a rabbi in Denmark to help her convert to Judaism, and Phil returned to Denmark, where the couple was married in 1959 in a civil ceremony, followed by a Jewish ceremony in Sweden. Phil and Anita settled on Denver's west side. They got right to the business of creating a family. Miriam Basha was the firstborn, followed closely by Elisa and David. The family moved to the house they still live in at 2040 Raleigh, just yards away from Sloan's Lake, which they loved so much and walked around all the time. The tight-knit Jewish community of the West Side has been the crucible for the Cohen family. The psalmist asks, who is the person who desires life, who loves each day for the good? Well, Phil Cohen was that person. He was a successful orthodontist who also did a lot of pro bono work for underprivileged children, but he was the opposite of a workaholic. Phil did not live to work, and he showed us a great example for all of us. He worked to live. Phil got to the office in the morning, 7 or 7:30. He worked until 10:30 a.m., at which time he took a break to play tennis. He returned to the clinic in the afternoon to see patients, and he was home by 5. That was the time for happy hour with Anita. Each evening they had a drink and a snack and would talk over the day. They were a wonderful couple together. They talked all the time, and they were each other's closest confidant. They raised exceptional children. Phil always demanded good grades from them and a drive to succeed. But Phil and Anita also modeled a healthy lifestyle and values grounded in community and generosity. Phil was home every evening for happy hour and dinner, but then he would go out again to any number of synagogue committee meetings. He was a central figure in the leadership of the Hebrew Educational Alliance, as Rabbi Dallin said, serving in many capacities, including board president. He supported Jewish organizations like Allied Jewish Federation, and he was the president of the Colorado Agency for Jewish Education. Phil loved his Judaism, and he loved the Jewish people, and he was a strong supporter of the state of Israel. Upon retiring from practice at the age of 58, Phil and Anita moved to Israel for 2 years, where Phil taught on the faculty of the Hebrew University Hadassah Hospital from 1987 to 1989, where he taught orthodontics. Some years later, during the first Gulf War, Phil decided to go to Israel in solidarity and to offer whatever assistance he could. Here in our congregation, Phil perhaps is best known as a fixture of our Shabbat morning services and morning minyan. On Sundays, Phil brought wonderful baked goods that Nita had made. On holidays, Phil was proud to duchen, reciting the priestly blessing along with David and the other Kohanim over the congregation. He was very proud of that role, and his powerful voice came through over all the others. Phil loved Shabbat services, always sitting in his favorite seat over there in the back. And even as his dementia progressed, he never forgot how to daven. And we all enjoyed hearing him sing his heart out. Phil enjoyed life. He loved his family dearly. He was very close with each of his children and their families. He skied and played tennis with his children and grandchildren. Phil and Nita traveled the world and enjoyed vacations together. He loved going to the movies and taking the family out for pizza on Sundays. He loved his tennis buddies and his shul friends. Those who knew Phil loved him. He was smart, sensible, kind, and generous. He was funny and fun to be with. He was among the last of a great generation of Jews who grew up on Denver's west side, the pillars of this community. Phil Cohen will be sorely missed by all, especially his precious family, his loving wife, Anita, his daughter, Basha, and her husband, Jim Walsh, and their daughter, Sheena, Elisa and Peter, their daughters, Zaya and Mariasha, and Nick, and great-grandson, Enzo, and another on the way, and David and Debbie and their daughter, Jessica. Each of you inherit something of Phil's. I bless you to hold dear to his memory, to share Phil's values with the generations to come, and to be proud of the legacy he leaves you. May the memory of Phil Cohen be a blessing to all who loved him. May his soul be forever bound up in the bonds of eternal life. May he now rest in peace, and let us say amen. We now invite forward members of the family, beginning with David and then Elisa, Peter, the grandchildren, and Bash. David's, I'm sorry, Alicia then Peter.
Thank you all for coming today, both physically and online, to help our family as we celebrate my dad as Phillip Cohen. The Hebrew Educational Alliance was a central place in my dad's heart. As a family, we celebrated, learned, prayed, and grieved the loss of others here. My father was raised in the HEA on the west side of town. His mother, Elta Cohen, worked for Rabbi Lederman. Unfortunately for my dad, this meant when he or his brothers were naughty at shul, she knew right away. He taught us early on how not to get in trouble, especially at shul. This mostly worked, except for some uncontrolled bouts of laughter we had when we really should have been quiet. In the last several years of my dad's life, I drove him to morning minyan on Sunday mornings when he could no longer drive. We loaded up the car with cookies and pretzels my mom made. We'd talk on the way there and back. I love the time we spent during those years and appreciate the warmth and the love we always felt from the group of men and women who came together to pray and support the mourners. Now it's our turns. Thank you so much for coming during our time of sorrow.
Not long ago, Philip asked me who he was. He was on the floor beside his bed, unable to get up. Before you go getting distraught over the situation, you should know he was singing joyfully at the top of his lungs. I wrapped my arms around him together. We managed to get him up and back into bed. Who are you? He asked. Peter, I said. Oh, and who am I? Philip, I answered. It was a hollow answer, utterly incomplete. So Phil, let me answer the question more thoroughly. You are the boy who, meeting a group of wealthy men on the golf course midday on a Wednesday, had the foresight to ask, "What do you do for a living?" To which they answered, "We're dentists." Nice gig, you thought, and you, my friend, are the fellow who made it happen for yourself and became financially comfortable working 4 days a week and playing tennis just about every Wednesday of your adult life. You, Philip, are the young man who thanked your grandfather sincerely and graciously for giving you money to go to college and promptly bought an airplane with it. Then you worked your way through college selling shoes. Not such a bad way to pay for college, you told me. "Let me help you with fitting that, miss," you would say before catching a graceful calf and gliding a lovely foot into a sandal or pump. You are the smart fellow who decided to serve a bit more time in the military because it let you come in as an officer. He didn't go into the army, your brother Harold told me. He went into the country club. A bit of dentistry during the day, tennis in the afternoons, supper at the officers' club, and drinks in the evening at the base commander's residence. You are the fellow who saw that Danish bombshell and said, "I don't care that she's not Jewish yet." They don't come more beautiful and charming than Anita Zerling. I love her and am marrying her in Sweden after she converts and quits smoking, which she did because she loved you. You are the man who studied hard and took risks opening your own practice, the man who invested every dollar you could save so your family could live without worry. And you could afford your tennis club dues and trips to Polynesian islands and other far-flung beautiful places. You, Shlomo Pinazar, the man who dedicated decades of your life to this your synagogue, attended thousands of minions, spent many an evening going over books and arranging events, and who wagered with your son about when services would end so you could slip out and hit the slopes. You're the guy who jumped the next plane to Israel when Saddam rained chemical warheads down, the guy who went in when others fled out because you loved your country and wanted to be there in its time of need. You, Phil, are the father who loved his children so deeply that when all reason had left, you continued lighting up at the mention of their names. "No, Phil, you really can't go over to Bosch's now. It's 6:15 a.m. Pretty sure she's sleeping." You may have needed reminding about how to drink a soda, but you knew absolutely that your son David lived by the ocean in Florida and had a big job in computers. And you knew your daughter Elisa worked at a school across town. Yes, she does have a job directing teachers. That's right, Phil. You, Penny, are the man so confident in the world's love for you that even in your darkest dementia, joy bubbled out of you in wildly boisterous song. So, old man, let me tell you who you really are. You are the lucky fellow who found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the guy who got the girl. You, my great friend Phillip Cohen, are the man who lived happily ever after.
That was beautiful, Peter. Thank you. We now invite Phil's grandchildren, Shayna, Jessica, Mariasha, and Zaya.
That's cool, we gotta follow that. As granddaughters, our time with Saba was split into the before and the after. We spent a good portion of our lives knowing him as many of you did. Hardworking, funny, dedicated to his family, his business, and his faith. Then we spent a good portion of our lives learning to love the after Saba. The one that might not have been as stoic, but still radiated strength. The one that maybe didn't tell as many jokes, but still loved to laugh with us. And the one that no matter what would absolutely light up when he heard the words, "I love you so much." We are so blessed to have a grandfather like ours, one that laid the foundation for our family to build a life full of passion, kindness, dedication, and humor. We're each going to share a quick memory, some from the before and some from the after, but all full of love.
Saba had such a contagious sense of humor. There was one family gathering where I saw him and my dad sneak away, so I followed them. He sat in front of his computer and read my dad some pretty raunchy jokes, as Brendan said. Although I was young and I didn't totally grasp the contents of the jokes, I remember thinking how special it was that when he came across something that made him laugh, he had to share it with others. I won't promise I won't cry like a Cohen thing. I could tell you about how he would slip me gummy bears and gummy worms in the middle of services when I got too rowdy. Or the way that he would hold himself at every event. But I would much rather tell you what it was like coming from in the middle of the tears. I'll tell you what it was like coming from one of the greatest love stories ever told. To watch him light up when he saw my grandmother, and to look around the table, and you could just see it in his eyes. That he knew that these were his people, and the life that he built, and the pride he held for each and every one of us. I'll tell you how much he loved his community, and how at the end of the day, every memory that every one of us holds will continue to live on, and because of that, he will never truly leave.
There's an inscription that hangs in the bedroom of my grandparents' house that I stay in when I visit. And it's from November 25th, 1986. And it says, "Dear David, today, 27 years ago, your mother made me a very happy man. And it has lasted a long time. I hope someday that you will be as lucky as I have been. Love, Dad." When I think of Saba, I have a hard time conjuring a memory that doesn't also include Nita or Farmer, as she is to me. I see them walking together on a visit to Pittsburgh in search of the nearest bagel shop. I see them during one of their many happy hours, sitting on the couch together with his hand on her knee. And even later, as his mind slipped away, my cousin sent me photos of them resting together, holding hands. Something about that inscription must have worked, because a year or two later, my dad met my mom, and they've been married now for 31 years. Only 30 more to go to make that 61 that Saba and Farmer enjoyed together. My father also embodies that same commitment and love and kindness and humor that Saba did. And I can only hope that one day I am as lucky as they have been.
So, y'all wrote something down. My most concrete memory of my grandfather. There are many good ones throughout the years, but my favorite is telling him that I was pregnant for the first time and giving him his first great-grandchild. And he was very excited. He said, "Oh, good. When are you doing that?" And I reminded him every Friday until that happened. And when we found out that we were having a boy, I wanted Saba to be the first to know. So we made the gender reveal cake and we brought it to Shabbos. And before we revealed to everyone, I went into the back bedroom where he was laying down and I said, Saba, I have something to tell you. Guess what? I'm gonna have a boy. Couldn't really speak that well by then, but he grabbed my hand and he sat up in bed and he said, it's a boy! And no one else knew yet. So I was like, Saba, shush. But yes, it's a boy. And his enthusiasm for my growing family and his family around him is something that I will cherish forever. And I'm very grateful that my son got to meet him. And that her daughter will carry his love too. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll hear now from David and Bosch.
Dad's final years were marked by Alzheimer's. And those years were really, really hard, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about laughter and love. Phillip Cohen did many, many things well, but if there's one thing our dad did really well, he prioritized focusing on life and bringing laughter into our lives. He created a true balance between work and community and Judaism and fun. At his deepest level, he was truly a jokester. He was always quick with a joke or a story, and his punchlines, he delivered them like a true master. It was so fun to be at the table with Phillip Cohen. There are so many stories that I could tell you, but what I'll share with you are the memories of 3 big events. And being Jewish, it won't surprise you that they center around food. We had the most amazing Passovers. It was the time when we all came together, and as the leader, he was the ultimate director. I once invited someone to Passover, and I could see the look of, oh no, this is going to be such a long, long night. And I reassured them, don't worry, our Passover Seder is actually very, very fun. He was so good at keeping the Passover traditions alive, but also making everybody feel so comfortable. He would assign special readings to people, knowing that there was a laugh that would come out of that person as they read their carefully chosen passage. Peter, thinking about you. And for so many years, seeing the boys, Harold, Phillip, and Edward, at the head of the table was so wonderful. We would sing songs, tell stories, and catch up with each other. And as Basha said to me last night, as we were reminiscing about Dad, those Seders were so much fun. They were so alive with feeling and fun. So great. The second big event for us, Passover, of course, happened once a year, but Shabbat dinners happened once a week. It was a tradition in our home to always be there for Friday night dinners. And that tradition still carries on at my parents' house to this day. One of my favorite memories of my dad is what he would say when someone spilled their wine. Beautiful white tablecloth, red wine right across the tablecloth. And he would tell the story of the king who would start every meal by tossing his goblet of wine down the table and announcing, let the feast begin. And it was my dad's way of, he wanted it to be funny, but he also wanted to make people feel comfortable. People felt comfortable, and that was one of his special skills in life. If Passover came once a year and Shabbat came once a week, it was the daily happy hour that brought it all together. We've heard from other people as well. My dad got home at about 4:30, and at about 5, we would have happy hour. It was a time for a drink and a small snack as we sat and as we told stories of our day. Happy hour was a daily reminder to enjoy life, to balance work and life, to live and to laugh. Phillip Cohen, Phil, Dad, he was a man who knew how to make people comfortable, how to make people smile, and how to make people laugh.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to honor our dad today. And thank you, Mom, especially for being Dad's touchstone for the last 61 years. You made every day of his life perfect. I have so many exuberant memories of him. He took so much enormous pride in all of his kids and our mom's accomplishments. And they were far-flung to where Mom came from in Denmark. All of the family there also was just always kind of the beam in his eye. When I was in the fashion industry, he would jet off to the fashion shows in Paris. He'd visit me in London or in New York. We would all gather together in Denmark to celebrate whatever, just life. And when Jim and I came home to Denver with our baby Shayna in tow, he celebrated every play, continuation, and school event, no matter how painful. Always with a huge smile on his face. The memory of him from the last decade here could most succinctly be wrapped up in the word ice cream. It was his favorite food. There was not a night that went by without it. So it was fitting that I ended up at a job at Little Man Ice Cream. He came to all of our swing dances, bluegrass nights, movie nights, jazz. He especially loved the swing dancing. It was the music of his youth. Many of the swingers became attached to him and sent me texts throughout the last week asking about him daily. He reached people in crazy ways and made an impression that lasted. He and Uncle Harold were honored with the first scoop when we opened the factory on the old Jewish West Side, and he loved it. He cherished that video of those two brothers just kind of beaming at what had happened to the West Side. He also came with me to hula lessons at Adrift, our tiki bar and restaurant. He would put on his Hawaiian shirt, take off his shoes, and tap his feet to the sounds of Hawaii, a place he loved to go with Mom so much. Ironically, when he lost his ability to converse, he made up a new language, huli hey, huli hi. He sang it over and over again. When he went to Morningstar in April, the loving caregivers there wondered if he was a Native American Indian. Until I explained the hula reference. From there, they played Hawaiian music for him, and I would hear the staff shouting, "Huli hi" to him. I could never, ever be more grateful and indebted to the love he was shown by this amazing group of people. He was graced with the dignity throughout. It's fitting that my big man, who loved little man, had his last taste of life on earth eating ice cream. It was the perfect ending to a beautiful life. I'm gonna miss you every single day, Dad, but I know you're playing tennis, cracking jokes, eating ice cream, and dancing and singing with the angels. I love you.
Thank you all for your beautiful words, and we will gather during Shiva to exchange more stories and memories. We invite the community to please join in sharing those memories at Anita's home, which is at 2040 Raleigh on the west side near Stones Lake. Visitation will be today from 5 to 7 p.m. with a Shiva minion at 5:30 p.m. And then Tuesday and Wednesday visitation from 4 to 7 p.m. with a minion on both evenings at 5:30 p.m. We invite those who can join to proceed to Rose Hill Cemetery. Jim Cohen will have some instructions for us in a moment. And we now rise for the memorial prayer.
נשמת שלמה פנחס בן אשר זרק הכהן שלח שלמה וגם אבנתם מנוחתו אנא ברחמים מסתירך וצדק תחלמי ותרור בתרור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו, ואנוח בשלום משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
El Mali Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure. To the soul of Shlomo Pinchas ben Zelek HaKohen, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace and eternal embrace. May Phil Cohen's soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our service here at the Hebrew Educational Alliance. As the rabbi mentioned, we'll have interment at Rose Hill Cemetery. We do have an escorted procession today, so if you'd like to join us at the cemetery and in that procession, we'll ask you to return to your cars as quickly as possible. Have turn on your headlights in addition to those daytime running lights. And also have your hazards on. That will help us identify that you're supposed to be in this procession. There are additional instructions in your handouts, such as follow close but not too close, please pay attention. And those who are not going to the cemetery, if we can ask you to please give way to those who are. We'll also ask you to refrain from coming forward and trying to speak with the family. We'll delay their processing getting to the cemetery. If you'll remain in your places as we escort the casket.
Well, sort of Rachel.
Yeah, maybe.
Never know for sure. She felt it wasn't so necessary to dive into this right away.